Hey everyone, welcome back to another Tic Tac Taiko. If you have ever soloed in a Taiko song before, you know all of the things that can go wrong. So this week, I'm going to step you through a flowchart of all the different solo mistakes that can happen and what you can do to resolve them. Several months back, I did a flowchart on what happens when you drop your bachi. It was relatively popular, so I thought I would do another one, this time on solo mistakes. Before I go there, just remember, if you like the video, lots of ways to let me know. Thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment. It's all good. I love the feedback. Here we go. I separated all of the solo mistakes I can think of into 4 different categories. The first category is the most common type of mistake, and that's tempo issues. If you're lucky, as soon as you get off tempo in your solo, you're aware of it. But more often than not, a taiko player will play for a while and then come up for air and realize they're nowhere near where they thought they were. This can be very disorienting. When this happens to you, because it will, you have 2 choices. You can either bluff or break. Bluffing is the act of continuing to play while still listening for the downbeat so that you can lock in. You're sort of bluffing that everything is fine, nothing is wrong, until you can get back together. I find this is most taiko players' default, although it's a very risky strategy. If you spend too much bandwidth on continuing to play and not enough on trying to find the downbeat, you're just lengthening the time that things are going to be off. But if you go the other way and spend too much bandwidth on trying to find the downbeat, you risk putting your hands on automatic pilot. And almost every time I see this, what winds up coming out of the hands is worse than simply being off tempo. Ideally, you find a better balance between the two, but that's easier said than done. And that's why the bluff is a risky strategy, even though it is totally valid. The break is literally breaking from playing, devoting almost all of your bandwidth to listening for wherever that downbeat is, and to make sure your hands don't accidentally play something, keep them away from the drums. If you just stand there and freeze, it's even more awkward. So I suggest maybe a pose or some kind of simple movement that doesn't take a lot of processing. And as soon as you hear that downbeat, you're back on target. It takes less time, but the reason why most taiko players I don't see doing this is it feels more comfortable for a taiko player to play. It feels like there's safety in that. But in a case like this, it may actually make the situation worse. So the break is more logical, but often harder to pull off. The next category is all about equipment issues, specifically damage or breakage. And for this video, I'm just gonna focus on the skin or head of the taiko. Taiko hides, heads, skins, whatever, are all meant to take a beating, literally, and they do require regular replacement. But sometimes it still happens where a player puts a hole in the drum or makes a tear or a cut on the head, and it's really, really bad when it's a soloist. And it's even worse when you're the soloist that did it. If this happens to you, whether you caused it or you're going into it, you have 2 options. If you have a metered solo, that is, it's a set length and you don't get to choose when it's over, then your really only option is to deal. If you have a hole in the drum, play around the hole. If you've got a tear, play as far away from the tear as possible. You still have the rim or the ka of the drum. Maybe you can do some poses or some movements. Even if you don't normally do it, it might make it easier than trying to dodge the damage. If your solo isn't a set length and you get to cue to the rest of the group to signal when it's done, you can still do the deal option, but you can also choose to abort in the solo early to avoid causing further damage because the drum still has to be used for the rest of the song. This is a totally valid option. Even if you really, really wanted a solo, sometimes you just gotta abort. I realize it seems pretty obvious. If there's damage to the drum, you either play around it or you end your solo. Duh. But in the heat of the moment, when performance anxiety happens and you're freaking out and seconds seem like minutes, those options don't necessarily seem so obvious. And I've seen many a taiko player dealing with damage in a very awkward way that's not one of the more obvious choices. It makes it harder for them to figure out what to do, it makes it awkward for the rest of the group, and it makes it awkward for the audience as well. The next set of mistakes fall into a category I labeled hand farts. We all get brain farts in life, not just in taiko. I'm defining hand farts as when a taiko player accidentally adds a note or speeds up a pattern that they were trying to play at a normal tempo for no apparent reason. Just the hands decided to, and that's what comes out. I'm gonna try to demo some hand farts, but as I was practicing this, I found it's really hard to purposely do hand farts. It doesn't quite feel as good, but you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about. All right, so what do you do when the hand farts come out? Well, again, just like everything else so far, you have two options. And one is to ignore it. You know you did it and it doesn't feel good. The audience may not have realized it, but something is up and you're just saying, okay, that happened, I'm moving on. Totally fine. A little bit of suck it up. The other option is my personal favorite, and that is to repeat it. But you might be asking, why on earth would you want to play a mistake more than once? When you have a hand fart, there is a feeling of losing control. Your hands got away from you, and it can sometimes affect your confidence. In fact, a hand fart can often disrupt the flow, and I can see people's confidence as soloists kind of waver, and they take some time getting back up into momentum. Many Taiko soloists who experience a hand fart almost feel like they're getting knocked off center, and it takes a while for them to regain it. So by repeating your mistake, you are regaining some of that control, regaining some of that confidence. You are owning your mistake. And while it can feel really good to do that, it does require you to be able to hear what you played and be able to replicate it, which isn't always easy. I'm going to do my best to demonstrate both a hand fart and a way to replicate it. We'll see how well it goes. Another benefit to repeating a hand fart is even if the audience realized that something was off in what you played, if you play it again, it creates doubt. Maybe you meant to play that. Yeah, I meant to play that. And maybe you didn't get it because you're not sophisticated enough. It's a little bit of a game and it can help sort of bring the audience back on board. And finally, our last category is all about solo endings. If you have a metered solo, and you accidentally over solo, you misjudge when it's supposed to end and you wind up playing into the next section. Well, obviously, as soon as you find out, stop soloing. But what do you do at that point besides stop? One thing you can do is to be calm, at least on the outside. On the inside, you might be going, ah! But on the outside, you are reflecting whatever mood the song is portraying at the time. This is really good when the audience is going, oh, they made a mistake, because they realize, oh, okay, well, they've ignored it, they moved on, I'm gonna pay attention to something else now. It ends the event pretty quickly. The other option is to acknowledge the humor in the situation. You messed up. You can laugh about it, you can maybe chuckle a little bit or look at another member, acknowledge it. The audience knows you made a mistake. You know you made a mistake. If they see you laughing it off, they know you're human, they can sympathize. The moment is over and they'll pay attention to something else. That's what you want. The other kind of solo, the cue out solo, has a problem unique to its own. For the solos where the soloist cues out, essentially signaling to the group with some sort of pattern or movement that they are ending, there's a very specific type of mistake that tends to happen. It's more common in newer players because newer players don't necessarily have a lot of musical vocabulary to pull from when soloing. And often the patterns that they play are patterns that are familiar to them, like patterns and lines out of the song, and sometimes including the cue out pattern itself. So let's say you're playing your solo and you realize you just played a pattern or are playing a pattern that's very similar to the cue out pattern. You realize that you are causing confusion and now you don't know, are people expecting me to end or are people realizing I'm still soloing? Your first option is to decide, yeah, I was too close to the cue. I'm actually going to go ahead and own that and end my solo. But if you do that, you need to make sure that everybody else in the group is on board. It's not good enough just to do the cue. You need to make sure visually, especially with eye contact, that everybody knows this is the end of your solo. Because if some people don't, because you cause confusion, that's on you. The other option is to make sure that everybody in the group knows you are absolutely not done soloing. And if this is the case, you need to do something drastic. Do a big motion, do a big movement, key eye really loud, wiggle your arms, do something you may not normally do or something not normally seen in that solo to make sure everybody knows, oh yeah, they're still soloing. I don't know what they were playing before, but they got time. If you look at this week's flowchart, or even the one I did on Bachi Dropping before, you'll see a very clear message. It's better to do option A or B or C or whatever than it is to not pick an option at all and let the performance decide what's going to happen instead. This usually leads to the worst case scenario. If you pick an option at the end of the performance or even after the song, you can start to analyze, was that the right option? Was A the best choice? Yeah, it was. I'm glad I did it. Or was B the right choice? No, I should have done A. But to not take action and let whatever happen happens often can lead to the feeling of, oh man, I really screwed up. And you've completely lost an opportunity for growth right there. It's really easy to think that talent in soloing comes from how fast you can play, what kind of patterns you can play, how engaging and energetic you are. But for me, the big difference between a good taiko player and a great taiko player is found in how quickly they recover and how smoothly they recover from mistakes. Okay, let's wrap things up. I know there are mistakes that happen in solos that don't fit neatly into one of the 4 categories I created, and that's okay. I'm betting though that of all of the options, you can find something that would apply. For example, let's say something horrible happens, like your bachi breaks on a bad hit and now you have a stub. Well, that would fall under equipment, right? You either deal with it or you end your solo. That's what I mean. Hey, that was fun, wasn't it? I like doing these flowcharts. If you have ideas for future flowcharts you'd like to see, comments on the video, what you liked, what you didn't, let me know. Until next time, keep on practicing and be well.